August 12, 1978. A preseason game no one expected to matter. A slant route over the middle, and a collision that would permanently alter two lives. That night, Jack Tatum hit New England Patriots wide receiver Darryl Stingley, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. It's the moment history froze on Tatum, the play that swallowed everything else he ever did. Welcome back to Old School Sundays, the channel dedicated to correcting NFL history that's been flattened into headlines and sound bites. And before we go any further, thank you to everyone who continues to support this channel by watching, commenting, and keeping the conversations alive. These stories don't survive without you. For decades, Jack Tatum has been reduced to a single hit and a single nickname, the Assassin. But that framing avoids a harder question. How did a league that openly celebrated violence, marketed intimidation, and rewarded fear decide to place the entire moral weight of an era onto one player? To understand Jack Tatum, you don't start with the hit that ended Darryl Stingley's career. You start with the NFL that built Jack Tatum to play exactly that way. The NFL of the 1970s wasn't just a different era, it was a different philosophy. This was a league that believed fear was a competitive advantage. Defensive backs weren't asked to politely contest catches, they were expected to punish receivers for daring to cross the middle of the field. Highlight reels didn't celebrate coverage, they celebrated collisions. The rules allowed it. Wide receivers were defenseless by today's standards, and quarterbacks threw hospital balls knowing exactly what waited on the other side. Across the league, hits weren't accidents, they were strategy. Intimidation was taught, coached, and praised. Nowhere was this identity clearer than in Oakland. The Raiders didn't shy away from their reputation, they leaned into it. Winning meant breaking the opponent's will, not just beating them on the scoreboard. The secondary wasn't just a coverage unit, it was a message. Every catch came with a cost. This wasn't rogue behavior, it was institutional. The league sold it, fans consumed it, and coaches demanded it. And young defenders were taught that their value came not just from stopping plays, but from making opponents think twice about running them again. In that environment, violence wasn't a moral failure, it was a professional success. Players who delivered the biggest hits weren't warned, they were elevated. They became faces of the league's toughness, symbols of what real football looked like. So when people later asked how someone like Jack Tatum could exist, they were asking the wrong question. The better question is why the NFL needed him and why it spent years rewarding exactly the kind of football he played. Because once you understand the game the league wanted, the player it created starts to make unsettling sense. Long before the nickname, Jack Tatum wasn't a symbol of violence, he was a late arrival. He didn't grow up as a football prodigy. He didn't chase the sport. He found it almost by accident, only discovering what he could be on the football field once he reached high school in New Jersey. By then, he was already built differently. Not just physically, but mentally. He played running back, fullback, defensive back, wherever contact was unavoidable. That edge followed him to the Ohio State Buckeyes, where head coach Woody Hayes initially recruited him as an offensive player. It didn't last. Tatum was moved to defense, not because he couldn't score, but because Ohio State needed someone who could erase the opponent's best option. Wide receivers avoided his side of the field, tight ends learned quickly. If you crossed the middle, you paid for it. This wasn't chaos, it was assignment football. Tatum studied tendencies, angles, timing. His hits weren't wild swings, they were precise collisions designed to end plays immediately. Ohio State used him like a hybrid linebacker before the position even existed, trusting him to clean up mistakes and intimidate offenses into changing game plans. By his final 2 seasons, he was a unanimous All-American and National Defensive Player of the Year, a rare defender drawing Heisman consideration. Ohio State didn't win because Jack Tatum played out of control, they won because he played exactly within it. That's the part often left out. The discipline, the trust, the intent. And when the Raiders came calling in 1971, they didn't see a problem to manage. They saw a solution perfectly built for the NFL they wanted to win in. When the Oakland Raiders selected Jack Tatum with the 19th pick in the 1971 NFL Draft, it wasn't a gamble. It was succession planning. The Raiders weren't looking to soften their defense or modernize it, they were looking to preserve an identity. Someone had to replace Dave Grayson, and more importantly, someone had to protect the middle of the field the Raiders' way. From the moment Tatum stepped into that lineup, he wasn't eased in, he was installed. Opening day of his rookie season, he delivered hits that knocked Colts legends John Mackey and Tom Mitchell out of the game. Not cheap shots, not penalties. Clean, violent tackles that sent a message the league understood immediately. The Raiders had found their new enforcer. Media comparisons came fast. Writers likened him to Dick Butkus, not because of position, but because of presence. Tatum didn't just stop plays, he changed behavior. Receivers shortened routes, quarterbacks hesitated. Offensive coordinators adjusted entire game plans around where number 32 lined up. The nickname the Assassin followed soon after. It was splashed across headlines, embraced by fans, and eventually by Tatum himself in public. But inside the Raiders building, the myth mattered less than the reliability. According to head coach John Madden, Tatum wasn't reckless, he was trusted. He hit hard because that was the assignment, not because he was freelancing. And the results backed it up. Interceptions, forced fumbles, fear. In his first 6 seasons, Tatum piled up 19 interceptions while anchoring a secondary that became known as the Soul Patrol. Oakland didn't just win games, they imposed themselves. The league loved it, NFL Films loved it, the audience loved it. Because as long as the violence served winning, Jack Tatum wasn't a problem. He was a brand. But brands are only celebrated until the story turns. And the league was about to discover just how quickly admiration could become distance. If Jack Tatum's reputation was built on violence, one of the most famous moments of his career didn't involve a devastating hit at all. It involved timing, rules, and history choosing a side. December 23, 1972, AFC Divisional Playoff, Raiders vs. Steelers. With seconds left, Terry Bradshaw threw a desperate pass toward running back John Frenchie Fakua. Tatum arrived exactly when he was supposed to. He collided with Fakua, the ball popped into the air, and chaos followed. Franco Harris caught the deflection and ran it in for the game-winning touchdown, the immaculate reception. What's often lost is this. Tatum didn't commit a penalty, he didn't miss his assignment, he made the hit the defense was coached to make. But the rule interpretation, whether the ball touched Fakua or Tatum last, rewrote NFL history in Pittsburgh's favor. Tatum became a footnote and a miracle instead of the defender who executed his job perfectly. Contrast that with what the league chose to celebrate. In Super Bowl XI, Tatum knocked the helmet off Sammy White on the game's biggest stage. The hit was replayed endlessly. It was framed as toughness, dominance, and championship football. The Raiders won, the violence was good for television. That's the contradiction at the heart of Jack Tatum's legacy. When his hits fit the league's narrative, intimidation, fear, winning, they were immortalized. When they complicated the story, they were reframed, minimized, or redirected. The NFL didn't just tolerate Jack Tatum's style, it curated it. And that selective celebration mattered, because when the league's tone finally shifted, the same player who embodied its identity would be left standing alone. It was a preseason game in Boston, no standings, implications, no trophies, just a routine inside slant, the kind of play run dozens of times every Sunday in the 1970s. As Darryl Stingley left his feet to catch the ball, Jack Tatum arrived exactly where a Raiders safety had been trained to arrive. The collision was violent, awkward, immediate. Stingley collapsed to the turf, motionless. He would never walk again, paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of his life. Here's the part history often skips. No flag was thrown, no helmet-to-helmet contact was called. No fine, no suspension. By the rules of the time, it was a legal hit. The NFL took no disciplinary action against Tatum. The league would later tighten its rules on violent contact, but not that night, and not because of any punishment handed down. Instead, something else happened. The tone changed. Overnight, Jack Tatum stopped being a symbol of toughness and became a symbol of excess. The league that had replayed his biggest hits, marketed his intimidation, and celebrated his role in championship football suddenly wanted distance. The violence was no longer contextualized, it was personalized. Tatum retreated. Friends described him as increasingly isolated. The hit followed him everywhere, eclipsing his Pro Bowls, his championships, his production. Darryl Stingley, meanwhile, carried the physical consequences for the rest of his life, eventually finding forgiveness even if the league never found accountability. The NFL had finally decided the line that had been crossed, but the line hadn't moved, the spotlight had. And in that shift, Jack Tatum became the one person left holding the weight of an entire era's choices. After 1978, the NFL didn't reckon with its own role, it reframed the story. The league began talking about player safety, rule changes followed, language softened, responsibility shifted. And in that process, Jack Tatum became something convenient, a cautionary tale instead of a case study. What disappeared next was context. Tatum hadn't freelanced his way into notoriety. He wasn't a rogue actor operating outside the game's boundaries. He played within the rules, within the culture, and within the expectations the league itself had established. Tatum finished his career quietly. No grand farewell, no institutional acknowledgement of what the league had asked of him. The NFL tightened rules going forward, but it never publicly accepted responsibility for what came before. Violence was no longer marketed as brutality, yet the players who built the league's earlier identity were left to absorb the consequences alone. That's the uncomfortable truth at the center of Jack Tatum's story. He wasn't an outlier who broke football. He was the embodiment of a version of football the NFL once proudly sold, and then tried to move past without accounting for the cost. History remembers him as the assassin, but a more honest record shows something else entirely. Jack Tatum didn't change the game, he exposed what the game already was. His story isn't meant to make anyone feel uncomfortable. It forces a question the NFL has never fully answered. What happens when a league builds its identity on violence, rewards it, profits from it, and then decides it no longer wants to own the consequences? Tatum didn't write the rules of 1970s football, he mastered them. He played the game the way it was taught, coached, celebrated, and sold to the public. When the culture shifted, the accountability didn't move upward. It stopped with the player who had come to symbolize an era the league was ready to outgrow. That doesn't erase what happened to Darryl Stingley. It doesn't diminish the human cost. But it does demand honesty about where responsibility actually belongs, with systems, incentives, and decisions far bigger than anyone's safety in a silver and black jersey. This is why Old School Sundays exist. Not to excuse the past, but to examine it without shortcuts or convenient myths. If this story changed how you see NFL history, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the story you think deserves the same treatment next. This is Old School Sundays. Thanks for watching.